Back here on Hunting Hill on a Tuesday. Our pleasure now to welcome in reporter for Fox Sports, college football writer over at The Athletic, New York Times best-selling author. He is Bruce Feldman. Bruce, thanks for some time. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to be on with you guys.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to chat about some of the options that you think LSU may look to. You've got a great piece up at The Athletic, but we want to first talk about this Ed Orgeron era. You, of course, wrote Meat Market back when Ed was a young, excitable coach over in Oxford, and then wrote Flip the Script after LSU's national championship back in 2019. I guess I'll leave it open-ended. What do you think happened after that trophy was hoisted in New Orleans?
You know, I think there's a couple of big things that really were the most critical parts of this. I think, honestly, you know, he made some hot coordinator hires, especially last year with Bo Pelini, that were not good fits. And I think ultimately that was a big factor not winning enough just in the last year and a half. You're coming off, obviously, a national title in 2019. The pandemic hits. But I just think that the staff setup just was not great. I mean, some of the things that worked out really well, obviously finding Joe Brady and him being a passing game coordinator, his impact was terrific. I think Greg McMahon, the special teams coordinator, has done that proved to be a really good hire given the specialists they have added. But the Pelini hire, I think especially, was a bad one. And then, this year, we'll see, what the two younger coordinators, Durante Jones and Jake Peets, how their careers go. But I think what's tricky was this was a really hot seat situation. There was not much margin for error. And so when you hire two inexperienced offensive coordinator or offensive and defensive coordinators to learn on the fly, that's challenging, right? And so there's that. And then I think, an obvious part of this was Scott Woodward, the relatively new AD, was not the one who hired Ed Orgeron. So I think that, in some ways, people are looking at it going, man, I can't believe the guy won a national title a year and a half ago and they're making a coaching change. But that's how high the expectations are at LSU. I mean, it's different than almost any other job in the country. I mean, this is an example of why. Ultimately, people can speculate on, some other things about how, why LSU fell off. But I think it just came down to this. He didn't win enough under a high expectation, world in Baton Rouge.
You've spent a lot of time around him. I have not, and I don't pretend to have inside sources of information. I'm asking out of curiosity here. He admitted numerous times that he didn't handle things the way he would have liked to in Oxford and needed to learn from some mistakes. When he took the podium on Sunday, said, "I have no regrets. I'll never blank." What did you take from that? And do you think in a moment of confidence that he would say, "Yeah, I did make some mistakes, and I wish I would have done something differently"?
I think the part of it was, at Ole Miss, he recruited pretty well, but it was micromanaging the staff. I ultimately think the thing that was the hardest thing for him looking back was he didn't really trust a lot of people around him when he was at Ole Miss. And I think, he and I talked about this a bunch, for Flip the Script. I don't think, he kind of not only didn't trust the people, but I think he gave in to some of his own, he wasn't disciplined enough in his own instincts of how he was running the program. And when I was around him a bunch in 2019 for that book, he had total trust, not just in the coaches around him, but I think you had in the Joe Burrow situation was very unique. You had probably as close to you'll ever get as an actual player coach in a college program. And I think he had total confidence in Joe Burrow and also some of the leaders of that team. As he got further from it, I don't know how much, when the staff changed and the dynamic around it, I think that became more challenging for him. I mean, because, it wasn't just, having Joe Burrow. That was obviously a big part. It wasn't just having Joe Brady. It wasn't, you had Jamar Chase, they get Justin Jefferson, then you have guys like Patrick Queen blossoming. It was like different parts, and a lot of that stuff came together. In the last year and a half, it was almost the opposite. Almost everything that could have gone wrong, essentially did, save for when they played for Florida the last couple times. So I don't know how how much he would have looked at, at some point down the road, if we have a long conversation about, oh, I could have done this differently. I mean, if, I don't know what good it would have done for him to say, yeah, I probably shouldn't have hired this guy as my defensive coordinator a year ago. I should have gone in another direction or something. I'm not sure how much different, situation is. Does that just mean Scott Woodward's making a coaching change 9 months from now in the middle of next season? Who knows? I mean, because ultimately I just think that, he won a national title, but at the same point, it's like, usually coaches who've won a national title are usually coaches like in this situation. At some point, it's going to turn. I think in his case, it just turned faster than probably anybody would have imagined it would have a year ago.
How do you think Coach O will be remembered years later in Baton Rouge? And the second part of my question, do you think he's going to get another Power 5 coaching job in the near future?
I think that's a great question about how he will be remembered. I mean, on one hand, you have a guy who is from, unlike his two predecessors, Nick Saban and Les Miles, you have a guy who actually grew up, in the state of Louisiana. He loves LSU. And so there's that part of it. He got to lead LSU to a national title and have arguably the greatest season of any football team we've seen. So on that part, I really think, people are going to be able, no one's going to take that away from him. And that part of the legacy. I think the other part is how quickly it flamed out afterwards. We'll see what happens. Maybe they finish 7-5 this year. I don't think they're going to get to, run the table, but I think some of that will be determined, a little bit. If they lose the next 5 games and they finish with a losing record, I think that will be a footnote to this. If they go on and somehow get 8-4 or better, I think that'll be sort of a footnote. But I think, he won a national title. That's really hard to do. And so I think, as we get further away from this, I also think some of his legacy, I think, may be tied, fair or unfair, but who the next coach is and how that coach does. If you fired a guy a year and a half after he led the school to a national title, and then the next coach does not come in and win a national title or win 2 national titles, I think people will go, why'd you fire that guy who led us to a national championship? I don't think it's 60. I'd be a little surprised. I'm not saying it won't happen if he ended up coaching again next year or even a little down the road, because I just don't know where he goes. He got to coach his dream at his dream school. I don't see him going to be somebody's D-line coach. And he's been in the NFL, and I think he felt like that wasn't really for him. So I don't see him going to the NFL. And to be a head coach again, I just don't see him taking a job at like a mid-major or, a lesser Power 5 school that he would want to jump back into. I just don't know where you go from that dynamic. I mean, it could happen. Coaches still coach, but my guess is, he probably won't do that.
Bruce Feldman is our guest. Great local content on The Athletic, guys like Brody Miller on the LSU beat, and great national content as well. Bruce is very much a part of that. He's got a piece up on The Athletic right now. LSU's next football coach, Bruce Feldman's candidates to watch from an SEC West rival to a national champion. You put this out on Sunday. I know there's going to be some moving pieces with USC open, with LSU open throughout the rest of this college football season. One or two that maybe stand out to you at this point, at this early in what is now a search?
I think James Franklin is a candidate at both places. He obviously did really well in the SEC. I mean, what he did at Vandy is pretty remarkable considering how awful Vandy was before and how awful they've been since he left. But he did well at Penn State. I think he would be the top candidate, from my understanding, at USC right now. I think if you look at it from just, the situation of, okay, he's at Penn State, it's a good job, but he's also got Ohio State in the same division, which is probably an even better job. If you go to USC, you are the top dog in the Pac-12, traditionally and resource-wise. If you go to LSU, it's a great job, lots of resources. Obviously, you can win a national title there. But you got, not only did you have Ohio State in your division in the Big Ten East, if you go take this job, you got Nick Saban in your division, among others. And there's no Nick Saban or Alabama in the Pac-12 South. So a couple other names I've heard that will get consideration. Mel Tucker at Michigan State. He's obviously on Saban's staff at LSU. My sources have told me that there's a couple of key influential people at LSU who really are enamored with Mel Tucker. We'll see if he would even make that move. I think he would have to be hard for him to say no, but this would be the third move in 5 years for him, or less than 5 years. And also, they're having a really good year at Michigan State, but this will be his first winning season in 3 years. So I don't know if it's how that would play. That would seem like a gamble for Scott Woodward. I think he could also look to stay in state at Billy Napier, who's done a terrific job at University of Louisiana. But I think there's some folks who are like, would LSU and Scott Woodward really hire a Sun Belt coach? And I think that's going to be interesting, as we reported in our story that you're referencing, in the search story on The Athletic, that he is going to swing for the fences. Somebody close to Woodward told me that, he's going to make Dabo Swinney say no. Dabo Swinney only has a $3 million buyout. Jimbo Fisher has no buyout, but would those guys already have really good jobs? Is LSU that much better on the job to make that move? We'll see what Scott Woodward can reel in here.
We know you'll be all over it. You can follow him on Twitter at Bruce Feldman CFB and get a subscription to The Athletic. You can also buy his book, Flip the Script, at Amazon. Bruce, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.